All right, we are now recording.
Okay.
Mind your P's and Q's from this point on, everyone. You don't want to end up on Entertainment Tonight.
Definitely no.
Hopefully not. All right. Joe, do I have the hosting? Yes, I have the. Great. Right on cue. Thank you, Joe. All right. So let's do this. Can everyone see this lovely flyer?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
These two handsome and beautiful guests that we have today, along with the also handsome and beautiful Patty Arias with us. So we are all here this morning to speak about UK co-productions, which is very exciting. And we are very excited to welcome our very special guests, of course, from the British Film Commission and Film London, Mr. Adrian Wootton, who is the Chief Executive of Film London and the BFC. So welcome, Adrian.
Thanks very much, Dale.
Thank you. And of course, Helena Mackenzie, who is the head of inward investment of Film London, who's also a longtime MMFMer. So welcome as well to the program, Helena.
Hi.
Hi. Okay, and I would like to turn it over to our wonderful, incredibly talented and executive producer and chief executive of the Miami Media Film Market, as well as the executive director of Camagol, Patty Arias.
Hi, too many titles. Welcome, everybody, and thank you, Helena and Adrian, for taking the time to be with us here today. We have a lot of exciting things going on, so I don't want to take any more time, so just take it away.
Excellent. Thank you, Patty. So yes, I'll just ask everyone if you could just do us the honors, the favor of muting yourself during the program. And then if you did have any questions, just do it in the chat box and we will get to them at the end of the session. So I am now going to start this mission control and see if this works. I'm going to now switch over to the presentation. We're going to start with Adrian giving us a wonderful overview with the latest and greatest on the UK incentives, co-productions, and all the other amazing, fabulous work that's being done at the BFC and Film London. So I am going to share this now.
Ooh, we got to the end before the beginning.
Oh, yes. We're
Got many
bookending
questions.
it.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, let's do it that way. Okay, I think that looks a little better.
That's great.
I'm going to go into the full screen mode here. So we should be able to, does everyone see that okay now? All right. Adrian, are you seeing the slideshow?
I am, Jael, absolutely.
Right. Kick it off, Adrian.
Okay, so I've had the pleasure. Thank you very much, Jael. Thank you very much, Patty, and all of our dear friends at MMFM. It's great to be back with you again. What I'm going to do very quickly, and I emphasize very quickly, is give you an update. There's been a lot happening. I mean, since we were last with you in July last year, my goodness, nearly a year since we were last in Miami. A lot's happened, and we're looking forward to being with you in person in September. But in the meantime, it's just to kind of update you. There's been a lot. It's been a very dynamic time in the UK film and television industry. An awful lot of developments, an awful lot of exciting things going on, and I know that I'll talk about them in more detail in person in September. But just to give you a snapshot on where we are and what's been happening since the last time I had the pleasure of being on the webinar. So, but before I do, I think we've got the BFC showreel, which just I always like to show some film stuff. So I think we're going to play the BFC showreel to begin with, and that'll set the kind of movie TV context, hopefully.
Yes, absolutely. So I am going to now switch over to the BFC showreel, and we will get started on that.
Name?
Bond. James Bond.
The time has come for the social season.
What do you want to be? A performer?
Well,
Yeah, it's horrible. No, thank you.
welcome to England.
You only get one life. Find your voice.
Tonight is our night.
Whatever happens, we'll make sure you're safe.
No one wants to be anything other than what they are.
Do you want to be happy, or do you want to be free?
I'll be stinking rich.
I am Detective Hercule Poirot, and I will deliver your killer.
The hunt begins.
There's a myriad of universes out there.
Look how far we've come. It's a family united.
These are extraordinary individuals.
Get the e-brake for me, would you, darling?
Oh, for God's sake.
The universe is made of stories. Where anything and everything can happen.
Why don't you start by telling me your earliest memory?
Better get dressed first.
There's a great big world out there with no fence around it. Every day could be an adventure.
Real power lies in understanding who it is you're truly fighting and how they can be defeated.
The world has a way of changing, and we change too. There are moments that separate us, but we always come back together. I've come back to play.
So there you have a little modest showreel of some of the minor highlights of film and television being made in the UK over the last couple of years, and that doesn't, that doesn't have everything on it, but that's the stuff we've cleared, and it's a pretty it's pretty comprehensive. We also have a Film London showreel, which I think we can fit it in later. We'd like to show you that as well, because that also covers games and animation and artist moving image in more detail as well. But anyway, next slide, please. Let me give you so I'm sure a lot of people on the call understand this, but just the years of you who haven't been necessarily aware of what's going on or what's been going on in the UK, is that as a result of the global demand that's been caused by these people and of course other studios, we've had the biggest uptick in film and television production in the UK's entire history. More film and television being made in 2021 and 2022 than ever before. We hit record figures, and it's all down to the global production demand and the conditions that we created in the UK on talent, on talent and skills, on the fiscal incentives that we have, the tax credits that we've had, on the infrastructure that we built, and on the visual effects and post-production. And notwithstanding the fact, and I know only so well and you do, that we're in the middle of a writer's strike, and there's definitely been a slowdown, and we've got various economic pressures, global economic pressures, slowing things down. We don't believe that the underlying growth and the content demand is going to disappear off a cliff. We think it will recover again in 2024, and we're looking forward to it picking up after this, hopefully the resolution of the industrial dispute and the labour relations dispute that's currently going on. Next slide, please. This just indicates the kind of content that's being generated, the money that's being spent. It's been huge numbers. In the UK, it's billions of pounds, thousands of jobs, hundreds of film and television programmes in London, the South East, and around the UK nations and regions. Next slide, please. Again, that indicates where we are now in the cyclical slowdown, and that pause, which, you know, with the right to strike 7 weeks old, I think, we're anticipating to last until the rest of the year, but we're already anticipating that changing and the dynamic changing again in spring 2024. Carry on, please. Next slide. Big spend on feature films. Next slide. Even bigger on high-end television. And it's high-end television that's really been driving the production boom in the UK, indeed all over the world, I believe. And we're in a particularly good position in the UK because I mentioned the talent, I mentioned the infrastructure. We also have a very mature television ecosystem. We have a lot of really highly regarded television companies, some of which are UK owned, some of which are co-owned, some of which have got US involvement in them, like the left banks of this world that are owned by Sony that produce The Crown, for example. Because of that infrastructure, because of that incredibly talented pool of creatives, together with our fiscal infrastructure, we're in a very, very strong place in the UK. Carry on, next slide, please. These are our strengths. I've sort of mentioned them. And the good news from my point of view in terms of working internationally and about co-production, about international working, about making films with the UK, using British talent, using international talent, is these aren't going away. We're investing more in talent, more in the tax reliefs, more in studios and facilities, and developing more and more international outreach all over Europe and the rest of the world. Next slide, please. That's the figure I was talking about. That's what we generated, broke all records last year. That's 5.37 billion in 2022. And the British Film Commission was involved in 93% of that production. And notwithstanding the slowdown and the strike we've got now, the bottom bullet point is important. We're projecting that to still grow at an average rate of 7.3%. Won't be this year, but we're expecting to go back up 4, 5, 6, 7, so that we move from 5.37 billion to 7 billion in 2025, 26. And what that means is that we're going to have fantastic economic conditions and enormously talented skills base, incredible infrastructure and fiscal incentives for you to come and work with us and for us to work with you. There's a lot of opportunities to work with the UK in this growth context. Next slide. The important point, which I'll certainly, I'm sure, be doing a whole session on when I come in September when the legislation comes in, is that the UK government working with us agreed to amend our tax reliefs. There's certain changes, a bit boring to go into this webinar, but there's certain changes going on in global tax legislation, and the UK government has future-proofed us against those. And so we changed from one system to a new system, which will be introduced in January. And that new system is future-proofed against global tax legislation changes, will be a slightly more valuable credit, and is increasing the value specifically of the animation tax credit. The government's also looking about whether it increases the value of the tax credit in relation to visual effects as well. And we'll be able to give you more detail of that in the autumn. But the tax credit, the headline is the tax fiscal incentive in the UK just got better. And it will be getting even better from January onwards. And there's going to be a seamless shift from one system to another. And the two systems will run in parallel for some time to ensure that we can explain to everyone how the systems work and how you can access those systems. Next slide, please. Well, I'm going to ask Helena to talk about this and more in the chat about But these are the things, rather obviously, that Film London does, and which we'd like you to come and talk to us about if you want to work with the UK. If you want to work on the ground with the UK, you want placements, you want training, you want information, you want to know about investment opportunities, you want to know about a production finance market and upstream. I'm going to leave Helen to talk about those. Then come and talk to us, because we are the kind of one-stop shop for London. Next slide. And then we're the one-stop for the UK. If you want to know about Scotland, Wales, or Northern Ireland, equally come and talk to us, because not only can we tell you about the British Film Commission, tell you about the tax reliefs, about the infrastructure, about the talent, we also can tell you about the other fiscal incentives that are available in Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland, and new funding pots that are opening up in and have opened up in places like Yorkshire and Birmingham and Liverpool. There's actually quite a lot of soft money, soft subsidy available in the UK, not just with the tax credit, the tax reliefs, but actually with local subsidies that you can tap into if you decide to shoot in particular regions. Next slide, please. We've been building a lot of studios. That's the headline from this. The other thing is you'll have no problem with infrastructure. We had 5 million square feet of studio space, and in the last 2.5 years, we have been involved in the planning and building of what will be an additional 4 million square feet of space by 2025. So by 2025, we'll have pretty much doubled the size of infrastructure that's available to use in the UK. Next slide.
Me saludo como muy normalita, como que yo te saludo a ti como que no está pasando nada.
Next slide.
Just a reminder, everyone, please mute your microphones during the presentation portion. Thank you.
Just about to finish, I think. That indicates that the infrastructure that's available to you all over the UK if you want to come and shoot for locations, if you want to develop a co-production. And actually, I should also say that Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland, apart from if you're working with other European countries and you're using co-production treaties with other European countries, whether that's Spain or Italy or even Ireland, there are also, each of these regional funds do have a co-production element built in with them to incentivize you if you're doing an international co-production. And we could give you more detail about that if you're interested in doing that. There's a particular production by a dear friend of ours, a producer called Andrew Bendell, who is currently putting together a Scottish, English, Italian co-production as we speak. Next slide, please. Skills. We're doing an enormous amount of work on skills. That's probably the headline, is that we realize that we need even more talented people. I'm delighted to say that this is a brand new development. Apart from the change to our tax credits, we're putting together probably the largest skills program for film and television on planet Earth. We have a national skills task force that I'm part of. We have announced a gigantic new series of regional clusters working with industry employers, higher education, further education, training providers to deliver skills on the ground throughout the entire nations and regions, the 7 creative hubs. Next slide, please. And that's sort of reflecting that in terms of that enormous amount of skills work that we're doing. So we believe we'll be able to give you fantastic people to work with across the whole of the UK's nations and regions, because we are training. We're going to be training a lot more people over the next 3 years. Next slide, please. And that's how we're doing it. I've just mentioned the hubs. These are the people we're working with in our hub. And it's a really, really massive initiative. We talked about it in Cannes recently. And as I say, most of our friends want to learn from us in terms of examples, because I think we're doing this at a speed and pace that certainly isn't being done anywhere else in Europe. Next slide, please. And then something about animation. Helena can talk about this. I mean, I know that there's a big push in Miami on animation. We obviously brought some people, some animators with us last year. And our emphasis on animation is continuing, is developing. We currently have our animation man at the Annecy Film Festival in one of the biggest animation festivals in the world right now, with a British stand. He's representing Film London at. We're about to do more roundtables on animation in London. And as I mentioned, the UK's animation tax credit has just become more valuable, and that will be implemented by another 4% in January. So we're really putting a new and invigorated emphasis on animation. Next slide, please. And I think this might be the last one. I still believe this. Notwithstanding doom and gloom and people being worried about, what's happening in terms of slowdown, what's happening in terms of the writer's strike, those are things and challenges that we've got to overcome, but they're short-term challenges. The underlying trend is growth. The underlying trend is more investment coming into our industry, more opportunities for people, and more opportunities for us to work with you. The UK also is very much a hub for Europe, and this is an important point. I know Miami realizes it because we've done joint missions together with Spain, for example. But it's really important to emphasize we've been doing an awful lot of outreach. Helena has been with me engaged in this, an awful lot of outreach with Spain, France, Italy, Netherlands, Norway. We've signed new partnership agreements between the British Film Commission. We have new partnerships with Film London in those territories. And so if you're thinking of coming to shoot and you want to make something in the UK, but you're thinking of co-production with those other territories, talk to us, because we know everyone in those territories that you need to talk to about co-production, be it co-production between a US production and Spain and Italy, or a production that involves all 3, 4, or 5 of us. We have those contacts, we have that access. And when you add the European partnerships to the changes to our tax relief system and the added value of that and the added incentives that's going to add, you add that to the investment we're spending on skills, you add that to the investment we're spending on bricks and mortar in terms of the UK infrastructure of studios, the ongoing commitment of our government and the services that we can provide. I like to think that we remain in this fantastic position. I like to think that we remain incredibly competitive and open to collaborate with you and work with you, because we're really committed. We've now become one of the fastest growing industries in the world. We are the fastest growing industry in the UK. In the UK, we're bigger than oil and gas combined. We're bigger than pharmaceuticals. Yes, that might sound difficult to believe, but it's true. And we're not being complacent about it. We're just pressing onwards. And the way we press onwards is through partnership and working together. That's why we love the relationship we have with Miami. That's why I hope we'll carry on finding great things to do together and collaborate together on. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. And you did have one more show reel before we get into the chat.
Yeah, because that'll give you games and stuff as well. So absolutely. Yeah, why not?
Let's do it. All right. So, and we will save the questions as a reminder to everyone for the end of the program. So make sure that you write them in the chat box and we will get to them right after our panel discussion. But first, let's kick off the Film London show reel.
Oh, it is.
This is London. Oh, Mr. Gruber, it's wonderful.
This is a love story.
What did you say your name was again?
David Copperfield.
Guess we'll see you on the weekend then.
Stay away from the girls!
Oi, you getting on?
Yeah.
There it is, the Eiffel Tower.
5 cups of tea, please.
Wake up, Jack. Do you think I could have tea?
to fight and I want to win. Thanks.
People say I inspire them.
Where are you?
Look up.
All righty. Okay. So now we can get into a very, very fun discussion and bring in our good friend and colleague, in addition to Adrian, of course, Helena Mackenzie, to talk about a little bit about what we just saw. And thank you again, Adrian, for that amazing update on your incentives. Much like your show reels, they're like a fine wine. They get better with age, it seems like. So every year brings something new, better, and surprising. So Helena, I think it was great at the end of that reel talking about stories. So let's switch gears a little bit from production to storytelling, which is obviously at the heart of everything that we do, or we try to do at least. So why don't we talk a little bit about Upstream and how you help develop early IPs out of London?
Sure. So hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Yeah, Upstream is a fairly new initiative that we've been running for about 4 years now. And we do various sort of story and production initiatives for new productions and new projects to come in and hopefully get funded. But Upstream was something we wanted to do at the very, very, very early stages of the story. So it's kind of like an IP market is what it is. It's kind of like, it's taking somebody's idea. It might be a podcast. It might be a true life story that we've read in a local paper somewhere. It might be a crime story. It might be an illustration. It might be an illustrated character. It might be an internet published book. It could be something, but something that has not got even as far as a screenplay or a script or anything like that. And it's me and the team here, including my colleague Jordan, who heads up our talent development and production team, looking at something which we feel has got the energy and the creativity to go to be something other than what it is already, whether it's a story in the local paper or whatever it might be. We feel it might make a good TV drama series. We feel it could be a film, or it could be a game, if it's put in front of the right people who have also got that vision, who are working as development executives, for instance. So we started doing Upstream. We started literally just before the pandemic started, and it was just to kind of toe in the water to see whether it was going to work. Pandemic hit, so we took it online, and actually we keep it online now because it sort of works better online, and it also offers it out to a much more international audience, because it means that we can program our hipsters, as we call them, our IP creators, and they're not hipsters, they're hipsters. And we can put them, if they're coming in from the States, or if they're coming in from Europe or whatever, we can program them at a time which suits them. And they come on, and we run a platform for a couple of days where these TV executives are basically listening to these stories. And it's a kind of fireside chat. It's really very relaxed. And what we try to do with a lot of these creatives that have got the story, they don't necessarily know what they can do with it on a business front. So we we will try and elicit that information out from them as to make that sort of like almost like a business and financial opportunity for the development executives, whilst our IPSs are talking about the actual creative process. So it's really, really early stage IP that could be developed with the right company, with the right people, into TV drama, film, or games.
No, that's a great description. So, and I like the Ipster word. I think it goes well with our Wynwood neighborhood in particular. And it's funny that I'm glad that you mentioned that this is a virtual event and that you're welcoming international producers that have IP. So what are the sort of prerequisites if there's a Miami producer that has an early stage IP and wants to get involved with you? And sort of what types of materials do you need to have? And I guess that leads into my follow-up question, which would be, during our MMFM in September, we'd like to set you up, I think, as we mentioned, with quite a number of projects for you to have one-to-one meetings. So what would you like to see, both in terms of a pitch and collateral materials from the Miami producers that are interested in working with you creatively?
Okay, when we talked about this a few months ago, and we realized that actually, Upstream actually takes place around about March time every year. And we start to put the program together around about September. So the timing was really, really key for us to be able to be presenting Upstream at MMFM this year, because the timings are absolutely perfect, because we're starting to put it all together. So Adrian and I are going to be coming out in September, and we will be taking one-to-one meetings with anybody who has got this kernel of an idea, this germ of an idea that might come into something, and what we'd like to be able to see the passion that you have behind this idea that you've got, or this story that you've got, this story that you need to tell. We need to be gripped by your story, because at the end of the day, you may not have any materials, because it's so early in the day that you may not have anything to show us. But if it's an illustration, for instance, you may do. So it gives us an idea of something. But it's really about what that story is, and you've got to be quite a good storyteller to convince us that this is something that we think should go further. So we're going to be having these one-to-one meetings, and we do hope that we can pick up a couple of projects at least that we can then invite to come virtually online to Upstream in March, and then we do the same thing again, and either myself, Adrian, or my colleague Jordan, or whoever will have this very relaxed chat with you, and we talk about the project. So it's really it really is relaxed. It's important that we get the right information out there, and it's important that you tell your story, but it's done in a very sort of restrained kind of way. It's kind of, it's very laid back, but we just need to be able to demonstrate that there's a story here. So for instance, I can give you some examples of some of the successes that we've had in the 4 years that we've been doing Upstream. So we've had sort of like one major success for every year that we've done. We will probably only have, the first couple of years, we only had 10, 12 projects. This year, we will take it up, and we'll be having sort of nearer sort of 20 to 25, somewhere like that. So we're having a few more. But we had a podcast that came from a New York podcaster, which was called "How My Grandmother Won World War II." So look it up if you're not familiar with it. She gave us a fantastic story, literally, of her grandmother, who was not only an Olympian athlete for Hungary. She had a salacious affair with some Hungarian minister, and then became a British spy in the Second World War, and a resistance woman. And it was just like, this grandmother has got so much chutzpah, it's unbelievable. And and it's a true story. This is her grandchild telling us this story. We thought this has got to be made. So this has been picked up now by a TV company, and is being made into a TV drama. It's perfect for Sunday night viewing or whatever. This is the sort of thing that we want. So we've had podcasts, we had an internet published book that was picked up. we had this wonderful illustration of a sort of dark fairy tale young girl, story of a young girl having to grow up in the forest on her own. Her friends are the trees and the animals, and she has to fight against the developers who are coming in to tear down the forest and the big corporations. And so it's beautifully illustrated. It's just somebody who basically works at a market stall making cards, illustrated cards, and her stories are so incredible. We took her, that got picked up by a games company and is now being made. It's in pre-production for a game right now as we speak. So there's so many, and last year, or rather this year, earlier on, our success story was, funny enough, another World War II drama about the Dutch resistance girls, who had a very unique way of getting rid of the Nazis by luring them into the forest with their womanly wiles, and then they thinking they get a bit of a knee trembler and they get shot. And so this is now being picked up by a producer, and that's being developed into a film. So these are the sort of things. So it's really, true stories always work, interesting stories work, crime stories always work. So whatever you've got, you think that could be developed into any one of those mediums, via you guys, come and talk to us.
Great. And you mentioned a couple of things about the British sort of element. Is that a necessary part of it? Does it have to be set in the UK or have some kind of?
Absolutely not. I mean, obviously we'd like you to, but I mean, it's this kind of, this one about how my grandmother won World War II has got a British element because she ended up being a British spy or spy for the British. But she, it's all set in Germany and Hungary, so so it doesn't have to be at all. The Dutch resistance one is obviously going to be set in the Netherlands. But no, I mean, I think Adrian would agree that these kind of initiatives that we run are always about keeping the production wheels turning, because they help everybody at the end of the day. We are all about partnerships. We're all about putting people together and making things happen. So that's what we get out of it. With things like the production finance market, which is another thing, but I mean, that happens in London, or Upstream is instigated out of London, but the projects themselves do not have to be London. They don't have to be in the UK. Of course, if they are, we are also here to help you with that too.
Right. No, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. And so just kind of shifting gears a little bit back to the incentive and co-production world, what are some of the sort of lower levels or base levels of investment into the UK in order to access some of these credits? And are there ways to cash flow some of these incentives? So if you're an independent producer that's raised, let's say, $2 million American dollars, and you're looking to co-produce with the UK, what are some of the, on the independent side of the business, some of the resources that you have over there?
Well, the good news is that the tax credit for film, not television. Television has a ceiling. There's a ceiling. You have to be making, in order to access the television tax credit, you've got to be making something high end, i.e., so it's £1 million an hour minimum, or £500,000 per half an hour. So now you may or may not be surprised to know that the vast majority of television that accesses that credit is way above that amount, because the cost of making television has gone up a lot. With film, there is not that there's not that ceiling. So if you're making a feature film for $500,000 and you meet the cultural criterion in the UK, you can access the tax credit. There's a floor where you have to be spending about 15% of your budget in the UK in order to access it. But the amount of money that your film is costing is kind of irrelevant. It's more to do with how much of that budget you're going to spend in the UK. You can also, if this is unlikely with an independent film, you can also just use the tax credit to fund VFX and post. If you decide, if you're shooting in another country and you just want to do VFX and post in the UK, you can do that too. You just decide that early on, but there is no, in terms of the if you're shooting a 2 million, and it happens, there's a number of. I mean, we were in New York actually a few months ago, and there was an out of US independent film, which was, I think, just about £2 million, which is not that much different from $2 million now because of the exchange rate, which is shooting in Scotland this summer, and is using the incentive, but is also accessing soft money from Scotland as well, because it's going to use Scottish locations. Now, in terms of cash flowing, I mean, there's several ways of doing that. There are some UK-based banks, Barclays and Coutts, for example, who do cash flow. But there's also a couple of financing companies, actually one very big financing company, again, which has offices all over the world, Entertainment Partners, which also does production accounting, but that also does cash flow. And there are 2 or 3 financing entities, which, we have, access to all of them in terms of putting you in touch with them, of companies that will cash flow tax credit depending on certain conditions and how, believable they think the production is. So, if you talk to us and you talk to Helena and the team, or you talk to Helena and the team and people in the BFC, we can give you more information about how the tax credits work. We can give you more information about subsidies, but also about those private finance companies that also and banks that will provide cash flow against the tax credits.
Great. Well, that's great news for some of our Miami hipsters. So let's switch gears again, Helena. And I believe Adrian teased a little bit earlier in terms of animation. And obviously, I know Julian couldn't join us today, but if you just give us a brief overview in terms of what you're seeing in terms of the development of animation and what that means to your overall business and inward investment into London.
Well, I mean, animation's just gone through the roof in recent years, and it's really grown. We've got some terrific animation production companies based here now. It's interesting because actually next week I'm running a major British film export event called the London Screenings, and our lead title within that is a beautiful animation called Kensuke's Kingdom, which was made, it's from the children's writer Michael Morpurgo, and it's been made by a company here called Lupus, and they did Ethel and Ernest, they did The Snowman, they did all this kind of stuff. So animation has gone gangbusters here, and with the tax credit, as Adrian mentioned, that has really helped that to grow. So I think if you'd come to us 10 years ago, we would have had a very different story about animation, and now it's much more positive, and there's lots more. So we are very much encouraging people to come because of the tax credit. It makes it very advantageous to come here and do animation. The talent here is superb. We do have tough competition with Europe when it comes to animation, and with Canada too, but we are absolutely fighting on very similar levels with them now. So we really have sort of gone up quite a few notches. And a lot more of the UK, in terms of independence, a lot of the UK sales companies, and we have a lot of UK sales companies based in London, a lot more of them are doing animation now. They're getting into animation in a way that even 5 years ago they weren't. So it's quite a long game, because obviously it takes a long time, but the payoff is there at the end. And not only from a cinematic and theatrical point of view, but also the streamers are really taking more animation on as well now. So it's just a market that's just growing, and it's going to grow even more when the new tax credit comes in, which Adrian mentioned. So yeah, we're doing pretty well. There's some very innovative stuff going on. We at Film London took the time during the pandemic, to that moment when we all had to stop for a bit. It gave us time to think about some stuff that we were doing with animation. And so we set up specifically to work more with about working with disability in animation and making that more accessible for anyone with any kind of disabilities to be working in animation, whether it's physical disabilities or whether it's neurodiversity. And it's been a challenge for all of us, but it's been a fantastic learning curve. And we are with you guys too, you know, motoring forward on that. And it's been an absolute eye-opener, and it's been a really brilliant challenge for us to take on. It's been great. So apart from it as a business and an animation growing in the UK, it's really, really interesting to be getting these new voices that we're getting through the disability channels that we're now opening up.
No, that's great. And that kind of leads me in perfectly into our last couple of questions before we turn it into our very lovely and patient audience is training and technology. And in addition to animation seeing such a huge growth, especially as you mentioned during the pandemic years, new technologies. Adrian, you mentioned a lot about all these new studios and millions of square feet being built. How much are you also, or you're seeing the local industry there embracing the newer technologies, everything from LED screens and motion capture and some of the sort of new ways of creating content that we've seen kind of started with shows like The Mandalorian and such? Is there a lot of activity and a lot of enthusiasm for growing that part of the business as well?
There really is. I mean, there's, I think like, you know, every developed economy where there's a film and television business, and because we have such a concentration of digital technology businesses, you know, in the UK and particularly in London, the visual effects industry, the emphasis on virtual production is getting very, very big indeed. I mean, there's a lot of, as they call them, volumes been installed in studio spaces and more volumes being done. It's part of the training programs because obviously actually conventional craft technicians aren't automatically able to just go, oh, well, you know, we shot normally as a DOP. We can do the same in an LED volume. You can't. And the same with art design. And so there's a whole new area of skills training and opportunity opening up, especially as we are seeing, because of the way in which VP works, is that convergence between games technology and film is happening. And so there's now a kind of crossover. I mean, actually, it's very interesting. And I know that obviously this is happening in the States and it's happening in the UK, is that all of a sudden you have a crossover between technology and training and content generation. I mean, you know, obviously with things like Super Mario Brothers and the all of a sudden we've got actually good movies being adapted from games instead of terrible movies being made from good games, as was happening in the past. So that kind of that intersection, and it's being reflected in our Games Festival and what we're doing at Games London as part of Film London's remit. So there's a lot of emphasis on that, and actually it's quite a fortuitous day to be telling you this, because there was a big government announcement that we were part of yesterday, where the government announced more money in the UK to go into new technology development and cluster development. And the government announced that they were investing £50 million in a new tech lab called CoStar, which will be on Pinewood Studios in the UK, looking at all aspects of cutting edge R&D in our industry, which is part of our new skills cluster. So it's very exciting for us. I was also in Northern Ireland and in Belfast, where the House of Dragons made and Game of Thrones was made, and How to Tame Your Dragon, the live action movie, is currently being made. Is they're building this incredible lab as well. It's called Studio Ulster, which is going to have 3 VPN stages, a mocap stage, and an R&D research lab with PhD students coming from all over the world, based on Boston's MIT, to look at, again, cutting edge technology. So the wheels of tech and their relationship to film and television are moving pretty rapidly, and our government has sort of kickstarted this with some new investment, which was only literally announced yesterday morning.
Wow, there you go. Timely and good in nature. And speaking of time, let's go into our Q&A. So if anyone does have any questions, it's probably easier if you just throw it in the chat box there. And let's just go through here and see what we have. 1 second. So Patty was asking where online can you go to find the latest incentive information? Is it really filmlondon.org, BFC? That way, you know, if folks want to download some info.
Yeah, it's on the Film London website. There's a lot of detail on the BFC website, some of which I pulled for that presentation. And you can also look up bfi.org.uk certification unit, and there's information about the tax credits there. So there's a few easy sources to look at, and that does have information. It has some information about the new tax credit that's being introduced, the tax incentive that's being introduced. It's called. It's got a new acronym. It's going to be called the audio-visual. It's the AVEC, audio-visual expenditure credit. But we'll be putting the full detail of the full legislation about that is out in July, and we'll be putting that on our website, and we'll be able to talk about it in great detail in September. So, yeah.
Okay, so keeping going down to this, Juanisa asked, do you have any incentives for co-production between US, UK, and Africa?
There isn't. I mean, I think I'd have to look. I don't think there are. We have a co-production treaty with Morocco, which does mean that the credit in Morocco and the credit in the UK works, because a lot of people, bigger films particularly, like using Morocco for desert and landscape, which of course, as you might know, notwithstanding global warming, we don't have much desert in the UK. So, you know, you have to go somewhere else, and you can either go to Spain, Malaga, etc., or you can go to Morocco. And we do have a treaty with Morocco. I don't believe we have. There is talk about working more closely with Nigeria.
Yeah, there was a BFI trip, wasn't there?
Yeah, there was a BFI. Exactly right, Helena. There was there is an attempt, a developing situation about working more closely with Nigeria, but we don't have a treaty
with MMFM.
Great. So let's move right along. Remember, guys, if you're not asking a question, make sure you mute your microphone.
There was
Go
one
ahead, Adrian.
Ryan.
Yes, Ryan. We have a female filmmaker, Ryan, who shot a film and is looking to develop a new project, and wanted to see how to get in touch with you both in terms of further developing her story.
Can I just say on that one, then, right at the moment, I touched on it very briefly.
You want cucumber sandwich, cucumber tomato?
Sorry, guys, please mute your microphones. Thank you.
I'll have a cucumber sandwich.
I'll cut it later, but if you want it now, I can give you. But there's poha, there is suji, the bread.
Right, Ryan. At the moment, we have something called the production finance market, which takes place in October every year. And at the moment, the applications are out to apply to come to the production finance market. It is for feature films. So please go onto our Film London website and production finance market. And it will all come up. And you can apply to that. And if you're selected, you get to meet all sorts of people who can help you put that together. But Scotland and England, you know, we can certainly help you. We can certainly put you in the direction of some of the people within. Adrian certainly can, much more so than me. But
you've just gone.
Yeah, sorry, guys. 1 second. Helena, do you mind to let unmute yourself? There you go.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't realize I didn't. So what I'm saying is the production finance market is open right now for applications. So for anyone who has got something that you would like some finance for, it is for feature films. It happens in London in October every year. It's a 2-day speed dating event, basically, for producers of projects and financiers. So if you've got something, whether you're shooting it in the UK, Scotland, London, wherever internationally, there are the application process is open until the 6th of July. So do go on our website and look for the application there. So that was specifically related to Ryan's question.
Great. And a follow-up from very important MMFMer, Karen Hall, who some of you have enjoyed her many masterclasses at the market. She says, I am watching the 3rd season of Happy Valley, and I think Sally Wainwright is a genius. As you know, writers are on strike. Yep, we've heard about that, in large part because we hate that our profession has been turned into a, quote, gig economy. How does a writer with an idea rather than IP fit into the way you guys work? I believe this is related to Upstream. Is it possible to pitch an idea with no IP? In other words, there perhaps is a story, but there's no book or comic or podcast attached to it.
Yeah.
The answer is yes.
Yeah, you can. No, I mean, there doesn't have to be underlying material. I mean, you know, we do have people coming. We have novelists pitching. We have people with unpublished books, you know, etc. But as Helena said, it's really, if you have an idea and it's coherent, and we think it has, you know, a potential, a potential place, i.e., it could be a video game, it could be a comic book, or it could be a podcast. It could be, it could emerge into a novel, or it could be a film and television program. Then yes, it can be pitched to us and welcomed at September when we're there in person. Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. So I think we have time for one more question, and then we'll wrap it up. From Alfredo, is it right to assume that the UK would prefer proposals with already a certain level of foreign financing in terms of a project's overall budget? If so, can you give an anecdotal example of percentages relative to the total budget? So I guess how much equity versus the total budget would you be looking for? I think
that's not relevant to Upstream, is it, Helena? Because we're not looking. Nobody comes to us with a budget.
At Upstream, the ideas are so early that they wouldn't even have anything attached. So with the production finance market right now, which is where the applications are open for the finance market, we would be looking, there are certain criteria that you would need to fulfill for that. It needs to have a director attached, because you're talking about trying to finance something. So no one's going to give you any money without there being a director attached. There needs to be in the region of 25 to 30% of the budget, not in the bank, but you need to have it attached. It could be a tax credit though, so we would take a tax credit, and you need to have a developed screenplay, and you need to have a pretty robust finance plan about where you're going to get the rest of the money. So that's what we would ask for the production finance market.
Absolutely. Great. So just like a news broadcast, we are ending exactly on the hour, or the bottom of the hour. So I just want to thank everyone for this wonderful update from our good friends and colleagues from across the pond. So thank you again, Adrian. Thank you so much, Helena. If you have any further questions, comments, you have our emails, just get in touch with us and we'll make sure to forward it along to our friends at Film London. I want to say special thanks again to Patty Arias, to Joe Garcia for all his help today. I want to thank the other office folks over there, Ruben, Rafaelito, do so much work, President Joe Chi of Camacol as well. Can't sign off without saying thank you to my lovely family, wife, and kids who are being very quiet during this session, so I'm very appreciative of that. And just want to wish you guys an amazing rest of your day and hope to see you all in September.
Look forward to seeing you in September. Great to see you, JL and Patty and Joe and everyone else. Enjoy the rest of your days. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.